Are you trying to dominate your fantasy football league? Do you want so many championship rings it's impossible to sign autographs? Well, crack open a beer, pour yourself a glass of bourbon, and settle in, because you've come to the right place. Welcome to Hammercast.
What is up, ladies and gentlemen? We are back with Stacking the Box, episode 2. I am Jordan Rains, your host, co-host for tonight, shall we say, joined with Joe Herboth and Kevin Coleman. We are repping the Hammercast network. Y'all already know what that's all about. How you fellas doing tonight?
Pretty good, man. Pretty good. I'm excited to talk D lineman tonight.
Yeah, I'm excited to be here. I don't know much about IDP, but I'm coming to the experts. That's what you guys are called, right?
Sometimes.
Whoever told you that's a liar. Yep. But we're going to talk about some D-line players in Dynasty that we have had our eye on this offseason. We're going to stick with the DL position just because, you know, it's a sexy position to talk about. People that don't really play IDP usually know if you ask them to name a defensive player or two or three or four, they're going to name a defensive line player. So, you know, we're going to give the people what they want. Who are your guys' favorite defensive line players currently in the NFL before we go ahead and just start talking buys?
Well, I'm a big Bosa Brothers stacker, so, you know, I love both those guys, man. They got some high motors, and I think that, especially Nick, I think his future is up here, man. He's going to be a star for a long time.
Yeah, I mean, for me, watching, I have always respected the hell out of Cameron Hayward from Pittsburgh. He's someone I love watching play, and just if I was going into IDP, I think I'd be targeting him. I don't know where he stacks in your guys' tiers, but for me, he's just someone I love watching play. I didn't shout that out because you're wearing a Steelers jersey either. I like Cameron Hayward. I like watching him play there.
Cam Hayward's a dog. I said last year on our podcast, the IDP Army podcast, that if you had to take Cam Hayward or Aaron Donald in a fight, I would take Cam Hayward.
I don't want either one of them. So
yeah, the guy that picked the fight with Aaron Donald.
Yeah, I'd fight Aaron Donald before I fought Cam Hayward. My favorite pass rusher, everybody who knows me knows, it's number 90 on the Steelers, TJ Watt. Write this down. He is going to break the sack record this year in 2020. He's been 2x robbed of the Defensive Player of the Year. And y'all got to start doing my boy right out there, okay? So
yeah, he's a cheat code. He's the Travis Kelce of the defensive side.
Is he really?
Yeah.
Is that?
I mean,
man, it's unreal.
That's the Travis Kelce.
It's him and it's Jamal Adams. They're the closest thing because they are true positional advantage players. Now, people will tell you that Aaron Donald is a positional advantage, but that's not true because DeForest Buckner is just as good as Aaron Donald. He was actually better than him this year for IDP, but they won't say that because a lot of people don't even know that. So that narrative, that's all washed up. It's this guy and it's Jamal Adams from the Seattle Seahawks. They just give you points per game. I mean, full 1, 2, 3 points more than the next guy. I think I don't have it right in front of me, but I know Jamal Adams was putting up 4 more points per game than the next highest defensive back. And TJ Watt was putting up, I think he was putting up like 20 points a game. And the next highest guy was Myles Garrett, and he was putting up like 16. So that's per game. So that's big positional discrepancy from 1 to 2. So put some respect on those boys' names. But tonight we're going to dig through the dumpster. We're going to talk about guys that'll probably never put up truly prolific numbers. But you know what? Everybody's got to get a starter in there. You got to put your 2s in, your 3s in. You got to know who to play, you know, who to trust week in, week out in those positions. Guys that, you know, maybe you're not expecting a boom, but you know they're going to play the snaps and you know that they could, you know. So we've got a few dynasty buys for you all tonight. Keep in mind, everything is going to be in the context of IDP 1, 2, 3 scoring. If you guys don't know what that is and you're on the YouTube, which obviously you are, I'll pull that up. But IDP 1, 2, 3 scoring is 1 point for quarterback hits, 1 point for assisted tackles, 2 points for solo tackles and tackles for loss, 3 points, fumble recoveries, forced fumbles, pass defended, safeties, and block kicks. And then sacks, interceptions, and touchdowns are all 6-point plays in IDP 1-2-3 scoring. And we'll refer to anything that is not a tackle or a quarterback hit as an impact play. So those are all going to be worth 3 or more points in IDP. Those are going to be your most meaningful plays. I mean, those are going to be your equivalent to your, 20-yard, 25-yard, touchdown or, plays downfield, Allen Robinson. Those are going to be your equivalent to your, your big 30, 40-yard break-off runs. And then if you get a big play, you get a sack, that's your equivalent to essentially your touchdown on the other side of the ball. So it is hard sometimes for people when they come into IDP to understand the scoring because offensively everything is linear. You're moving the ball forward, they're going down the field, your points go up, your players go up. Defense, it's a little different because they get scored based on actions on the field and how far they allow the defense to go forward or not. And it's kind of scaled like that. So a tackle is a stop of an offensive player by the defender, but it's still allowed the offense to go forward. So it's only a 2-point play max. Tackle for loss, you've actually taken the offense backwards. So that is worth more. That's a more impactful play. So that's the context we will be talking in tonight on these players. And Joe, why don't you go ahead and kick us off with your number one buy right now in Dynasty at the defensive line position?
Yeah, well, he falls in perfectly with what you said. He's not a player that gets you super excited. He's really at the third best lineman on his team. It's Darren Payne for the Washington football team. This guy, he lines up next to Chase Young and Montez Sweat. So these guys are sexy names, and for good reason. Both of these guys are superior talents. But he is benefiting from lining up with these guys. Last season, he played 16 games and put up 151 points, totaling 19 total impact plays, which were the big hits that you just explained to everybody. He finished among the top 15 in defensive lineman tackles, and over his career, he's averaged 55 tackles a season. So he has a relatively pretty high tackle ceiling for a defensive lineman, and he actually posted more tackles this last year than Young and Sweat. One thing you do want to see from this guy, though, is his sack totals increase. He doesn't get to the quarterback as much as you'd like. So if he can bump that number up to anywhere from 5 to 7, I think this guy could find a way to sneak inside the top 20. Really, and again, it's really him taking advantage of what's around him. I don't think he's a better player than either of those guys, but they're getting those double teams. They're getting shipped by tight ends. He's coming in the middle, benefiting from one-on-one all the time, and he's putting up some serious stats with it. So I look for that to even continue to progress because Montez and Chase are still developing. They're going to get even better, and he's young too. So I think he's going to be somebody to own here the next several years. What do you think about him? Have you own him anywhere or a fantasy manager for him anywhere?
I have him in a couple of leagues. He is a great kind of, like you said, not sexy, but 55 tackles average at the defensive line position. I mean, that's a rock solid floor. That's a guy you can play every week. The 19 impact plays, I mean, that kind of is kind of blowing my mind right now because that's a hefty number for any player in the league. Just for reference, I think Budda Baker had like 18 this year, so impact plays. So his 3 pass deflections, and actually he was part of, I think it was my favorite or one of my favorite defensive plays of the season is Russell Wilson was rolling out and Montez Sweat was kind of trying to run him down, but it turned into a coverage play because he had too much room off of him. And Russell Wilson throws the ball, and Montez Sweat, he's got these long ass arms, and he jumps up and bats the ball. And then Darren Payne catches it for an interception. So this is the kind of stuff you remember when you love IDP because you watch these plays and you're like, holy shit, that's a 3-point play. Holy shit, that's a 6-point play. And then you're like, get up and run with it too. Like you're just like, you see all these things happening and it means something for you. So that was one of my favorite defensive plays of the year, and Darren Payne was involved in it, which it's funny to think, defensive tackle. I mean, he's got 4 pass deflections this year, an interception. Those are some meaningful plays that aren't just tackles and sacks. So I love that pick. You got any thoughts or comments on him at all, Kev?
No, I mean, I looked, doing my quick research for this. I saw that he was up there for that Washington team. I think that Washington defense is stacked. You got, like, as a Cowboy fan, shit. Like, I'm
excited.
terrified as that. I love all those guys in that DL. That DL is stacked. I think it was like what you talked about with Chase Young being there and stuff. Is only going to take the pressure away from Payne. He's probably going to get a lot of different. He's not going to get double teamed. He's going to get a lot of looks there. So I think that he can produce, but I am terrified of that DL.
Yeah, their front four I think is the most exciting as a whole in the entire NFL. And being in the NFC East, really, Dallas's offense is what keeps them in games. But I think Washington, they're my pick to win that division this year, and it's solely off of their defense.
They're dark horse Super Bowl candidates. Dark horse Super Bowl candidates.
Well,
if it's Magic running the ship.
And to your guys' point, I know I'm the offensive guy, but that offensive line on every offensive line in the NFC East is terrible. So the Dallas Cowboys, they're aging. They used to have a good offensive line unless they draft somebody. The Giants' offensive line is bad, and the Eagles is just a mess. So to your point, I think that DL, those line, and that especially that front four is going to destroy those offensive lines in the NFC East this year.
I can't wait.
And their number one sack guy last year was Matt Ioannidis. He didn't even play this year. Like, he's not even a starter anymore. That's how deep that line is.
Yeah.
And they have Ryan Carrigan, who's one of the league's best pass rushers of the past 20, 30 years. The consistency he's been put up. And he's just a rotational guy on the team. Like, they're so deep. So it's wild. Darren Payne is definitely benefiting from that with the impact plays. I loved that pick. My first pick for a guy that I'm looking to buy, or I'm interested in managing this upcoming year, getting late in drafts, is Carlos Dunlap from the Seattle Seahawks. He's not really a sexy name per se. He never really has been. He went to Seattle this year, though. He got traded midseason this last year to Seattle. And when he got there, things really kind of shifted for him. So first and foremost, he played 7 games this last year with the Bengals, and in those 7 games, he only managed 2 tackles for loss, 2 quarterback hits, which are, that's pitiful for a guy who, has basically been an all-pro player, or not an all-pro player, but a Pro Bowl player, and, consistently high-level pass rusher. Then he played 8 weeks for the Seattle Seahawks. In those 8 weeks, he had 6 tackles for loss and 14 quarterback hits. So he was getting after it. He was playing better football when he got to his new location. They dropped him this offseason, but they re-signed him. That was all, contract stuff. But they intended to bring him back all along. He got a deal there. He's the pass rusher that Seattle needs. That defense, if you remember, too, last year, when did Seattle start getting better? When did that defense pick up? It was after Carlos Dunlap got there. He made all the difference in the world. He closed out a game. Wasn't that a Thursday night game? He closed that game out with a sack. Mm-hmm. So, you brought this guy in. He still got the juice. He made a difference. 14 quarterback hits is a lot for any player just in general. Just for reference, your man Darren Payne had 8 last year. Carlos Dunlap had 14 in 8 games. So, that's a point in IDP, 1, 2, 3 scoring. That means he's getting the pressure. He turned several of those into sacks. So I am back on Carlos Dunlap, and just for reference as well, he didn't lose a step this last year. He had as many pressures as Chase Young, and we were just talking about how we were just gassing up that line, Chase Young being the premier player there. He matched his production pressure-wise. So for the people out there that have huge pressure fetish, there you go. He's the perfect 0 DL draft strategy guy. So if you're looking to get your first defensive line player and stack up on DBs and linebackers, you can get Carlos Dunlap probably post-round 15, 16, maybe even post-round 20 in your drafts. And you could end up with top 15 DL production. And I don't see a world where he puts up anything less than top 25. So,
yeah, I definitely agree with you there. So he's one of those guys where if you're mid-season and you're trying to make a push, and let's say somebody you have on your every week starter goes out, he's a guy you can trade for, 9 times out of 10 for next to nothing, because he's an older defensive lineman. He's not a sexy name, but you put him in every week, he's there. And especially if you have the opportunity to not even rely on him every week, just on flexes and buys and injuries, he's a guy that can make a huge difference for a fantasy manager.
And I'm learning from you guys right now. So for me, like, I know age cliffs. Like, I have a podcast this weekend. We're going to be talking about dynasty age cliffs. Where do we get rid of them? What do you guys do with defensive players like DL, like a guy like him? Where would you try to offload these guys? Is there an age cliff really, or do you just kind of roll with them on your roster?
This position, I mean, with technology today and these athletes, getting diets and just being so committed to their physical fitness, they're playing a lot longer and they're playing a lot better. You can look at Justin Houston not last year, but the year before. Justin Houston had a great year on limited snaps, and I really look for J.J. Watt to do that this year in Arizona. I think his snap count's going to go down, but the same exact production is going to be there. And that's what the NFL is kind of moving towards, is getting those veteran defensive linemen and resting them, and having them out there for third downs. When it's a for sure quarterback pressure down, you want that stop. These guys are running out there and they're still producing. They're just, aging a little bit. But for fantasy managers, you can get a lot of these guys real cheap, and you're going to get the production that's similar to a, Chase Young, and they're going to be that mid-level.
Yeah, older guys, especially at the defensive line position, are always overlooked. I mean, Jason Pierre-Paul is a perfect example. 31 this last year. In Fantasy Pros IDP scoring, he was the number one defensive line player. And that was without 10 sacks as well. I mean, he had 9.5 sacks. It's because he had 14 quarterback hits. It's because he had, 6 pass deflections, 4 forced fumbles. I mean, these are big numbers. 2 interceptions for him this year too. I mean, because he is an instinctful player. So that's something I feel like defenders they age a lot more gracefully because they're playing reactionary and instinctual football. You know what I mean? When their athleticism dips down, they can lean into that other stuff and still be major difference makers. Whereas if you start losing a step, you just start losing a step. You know what I mean? And these guys that are, have an instinct and are athletic, they're going to just crush you. So that's why you see a lot of older safeties. Like, look at Malcolm Jenkins. He's not the most athletic safety in the NFL, not even close. But guess what? He's one of the best because he makes those plays that other guys don't. He consistently gets behind the line of scrimmage. He consistently gets home on his sacks. He knows when to do the right things. So he's 34. He just put up another top 20 season at defensive back. Last year, he put up a top 20 season at defensive back. Chandler Jones was the number one defensive line player, not this last year, but the year before last, 30 years old. J.J. Watt finished top 10. So the IDP players can age a lot more gracefully. And that's where you can swoop in and get big value, like a guy like Carlos Dunlap. And I was kind of tentative with my saying, he could be a top, top 15. He was like a top 5 guy the last half of the season last year. It's like that actually happened. So he could get back up there is what I'm saying. So you could get huge dividends. Last year, one of my favorite buy lows was Jason Pierre-Paul because his ADP was like DL 29. And I was like, that's insane. He finished his DL1. Nobody wanted him because he's old. So you have to just fight that off and take the points, and take the production. When I see an old player that's productive, I just see a productive player. And I'm like, give him to me, I'll ride him till the wheels fall off.
I don't know. That's fair. Yeah, I don't know. Like I said, it just depends. Like, running backs are dead at 26. Wide receivers are dead at 29. Quarterbacks, depending on if you're Fitzmagic, you live to your 48, and Tom Brady. But some of these guys, and it's interesting to see kind of what the variables are.
Yeah, and that's a really good point. I'm glad that we brought it up and we talked through it because we do want people to know that these guys hold their value longer than you think. Now you probably won't be able to the trade market for them won't be great, but like I said, take the points. Just take the points. So. Not everything's about trade value. All right, bro. What you got for number 2, Mr. Joe?
All right. Well, this guy, he is someone that I am 100% sold on. He is actually on your Pittsburgh Steelers, and he's going to benefit from T.J. Watt so much. It's Alex Highsmith. With the signing of Bud Dupree to Tennessee, this guy's going to step up, and he's going to perform in a major way. He only started 5 games last year after Bud Dupree went down with an injury. And throughout the season, he was only on the field for 43% of the defensive snaps. But out of that limited snap count, he racked up 48 combined tackles, 2 sacks, 5 tackles for loss, and an interception. So on the IDP 1-2-3 scoring, that's 105 points. But if you take that, his snap count, and you throw that into a 16-game season, if he were to get that off, the dude would have had 75 plus tackles. So I think this guy's going to be Bud Dupree at a minimum. I personally do. Watching his videos, Bud Dupree, I like the guy, but I don't think he was as good as we think. I think him going to Tennessee, we're going to see that drop huge in his stats there. So TJ Watt meant a lot to him, and he's going to mean a lot to Alex Highsmith. But I think that this guy's going to, at a minimum, be at that level. And again, he didn't see but over 25 snaps a game until week 3 or 13 when Dupree did go down. So I think he's going to fill that role really well, and I'm super excited for this guy. And I went through, after doing my research on him, I went through of my 6 dynasty leagues with IDP. He was available in 4 of the 6. So I've already got waivers in on him, and I'm going all in. And actually, Jordan, you had him in, I believe, the 2. So I think you already know. I'm super excited for him. I think they got the Steelers. I think they got to rely on their defense. So, and obviously the draft pending, I hope they don't do anything to fill that, because this guy did really well on, the time that he did get in after Dupree went down, and he performed better than Dupree was performing in his first 13 games. So I'm excited for him.
I'm going to try to share something really quick. All right, am I doing it? So
There's something happening.
Your man, Alex Highsmith. I like what I like and I don't like is this tackle number, because you see that it's over about 50% of his production is there. For the number of snaps that he played, to only have 2 sacks is a little concerning to me. I do have him, and I do agree with you. The upside is there, but to get this many tackles, 50, basically almost 50, which is a super high number at the DL position. Like you said, we were just talking about your other guy, Darren Payne. If I had any worry about him, it's that I wonder how well he's going to be able to get home, especially on a team where there's a lot of hungry guys getting home. You had Stephon Tuitt this year. I think he had like 11 sacks. TJ Watt's always going to get his. Cam Hayward is always going to be there, getting a few cleanup sacks here and there. So hopefully he can develop into that finisher. But he does have the tackle floor, and actually a high enough tackle floor to where, he might be one of those rare guys that could push up into, like, with full snaps, at the DL position, like 60, 70, which is enough to really carry you a long way in IDP, especially at that position. If the sacks don't come, but
the guy you can get, he's not going to cost you anything, more than likely. You might spend $5 on him. So if you're wrong, it doesn't work out, you're not going to have anything lost. But yeah, I 100% would go out and get him everywhere I could if he's available. He's definitely going to see the opportunities.
Look at Jordan creating the graphics and stuff. This guy, he does everything around here.
Man, he's ready.
Bro, you don't even know. What would we do? We were talking about Highsmith. I didn't like the Bud Dupree slander you put in there. Really didn't like that. I think Bud Dupree. And I'm somebody who I've slandered Bud Dupree, but it's like a trendy thing to do now, to like shit on Bud Dupree and shit on the Titans for signing him. So now I'm like, I find myself defending him more and more. But he does a lot still. He benefited from playing across from TJ Watt, but are we going to hold that against every jackwagon that plays across him for the next 10 years? I hope not. True. He was a big impact player. He had a lot of tackles for loss. He could, get home on his sacks. He did get pass deflections. I'm a little concerned, just because he was injured. You always wonder about a guy coming off, especially a guy as explosive as Bud Dupree. I know if you look at some of the next-gen stats, like he and TJ Watt are 2 of the fastest, guys to beat their blockers or getting off the line or whatever those metrics are that they always post. But the last 2 years, they've consistently been high. So he's a fast twitch guy. Hopefully he recovers fully and can get that explosive stuff back.
And his signing, I think it bodes well for the Titans defense, and specifically that front line. I think Landry and who's the other guy they have? They have Landry. what's his name? I don't remember his name off the top of my head, but I think their
It's just
numbers.
Harold Landry. Oh, they have that big Jeffrey Simmons.
Yeah, I think Dupree coming in is going to bode well for their numbers, and I just think Dupree's are going to go down a little bit. We'll see, but that's definitely my take on the Dupree signing. Not that we're talking about him.
All right, well, you know what? We're going down the rabbit hole.
Here we go. He's got a graphic for it.
Yes, sir. Let's talk about Bud Dupree.
Let's do it.
So, as you can see here, this is this is him in 2019. 11 and a half sacks, 16 tackles for loss, bro. I mean, that's a big number.
Yeah.
4 forced fumbles. I like the consistency here of this chart. It's very colorful. It's got a lot of points from a lot of different spots. 32 tackle for loss points. This year, he did miss some, like we said, games, but he still had 8 sacks this year. Like, that's, I don't know. I don't get the slander. I slandered him, but now, like I said, he puts up points all over the place. And it's not even on the back of big, gaudy sack numbers. 36 impact plays, and he's doing it from the linebacker position too, in most of your settings. So, his tackle numbers
I'm interested to see
massive.
How he handles the Titans' defensive schemes and what he does with the snaps he gets. It's definitely something exciting to see. I'm rooting for the guy. I actually am a fantasy manager of his in a few leagues still, so I'm pulling for him.
I'm only going down this road because I almost put him in here as one of my buys. So I figured, it's probably, what do you call those, synchronicities or whatever. So, Bud Dupree, he's not as bad as people are telling you. That's what I hope you take away from all that. So this idiot down here, don't listen to him. All right, my next guy. Now I'm going to sound like a freaking idiot. All right. So this is like a break the glass. This is your last probably pick of the draft. It's all upside. All right. There's really nothing else there, but Robert Quinn from the Bears. All right. Played through an injury in 2020. Bad season overall. Like, not just bad, just like awful. I think he had 2 sacks and he started like 14 games or something. His tackle floor is not high, but he's a proven disruptor. And what I mean by that is he still had 3 forced fumbles this year, and he has multiple forced fumbles every year. So that's a skill set. That's not something that just happens on accident. That's something he's having to work on. Where'd Joe go?
There he is.
Sorry, I missed you. Where'd you go?
Yeah,
you're all good. What an idiot. Anyway, but Robert Quinn, like I was saying, he played through an injury this year. That's the main takeaway point. He's going to cost you nothing. 2 years ago, he only started, 14 games. I think he had like 50 pressures. He had 9.5 sacks. He had a bunch of tackles for loss playing for the Dallas Cowboys. So we know he has elite upside. He's had a 20 or 19.5 sack season. So we know the upside is not just elite, but I mean, it's up there with the very, very best in the NFL. All right, he had 11.5 sacks last year. I'm sorry, I apologize. 13 tackles for loss. I think the big takeaway from this and what I'm saying is Robert Quinn, when he hits, he hits. He didn't hit last year, but he has hit basically every other year of his career. So this is just dive back in. It's not going to cost you anything at all. And you're getting, 10 plus sack upside with a lot of forced fumble and disruption ability if he can be healthy. Again, he's playing this with Khalil Mack, Eddie Jackson, Roquan Smith, Danny Trevathan. These are all veterans and elite veterans at their positions. So there will be disruptive plays available to him if he can get healthy. So I'm back in on Robert Quinn. And like we just talked about, another thing he's got going against him is he's old. He's 30 this year, so he was a year younger this year. He's a year younger than 2 guys we've already talked about. One of them we saw just have a top, a defensive line 1 season finish, or Jason Pierre. Here, I actually have this. I'll pull this up. He finished as the 3rd overall in IDP 1, 2, 3 scoring. But like I said, in Fantasy Pros, he was number 1. 11th season in the league. I mean, it's just you're printing money at this point. So if if Robert Quinn hits, you're going to get a guy who could potentially win you your league, at the last pick of your draft, essentially.
Well, I think something.
Any thoughts on old Bobby?
Yeah, I think something that people forget about Quinn is he's been in a long time, but his age isn't there. It feels like he's been around forever. Like you mentioned his 19 and a half sack season. To me, that feels like forever. I mean, it's almost a decade, I guess, but it was with the Rams. And I mean, it just feels like a literal whole lifetime ago. And he's still out there playing. I mean, it sounds to me like he should be at least 35, 36, but you said he's only 30. So that's crazy to me to think about.
Oh, man. Crazy. I'm looking at his and Jason Pierre-Paul's numbers. I mean, he's got 82 sacks in his career. Jason Pierre-Paul's got 89. I mean, he's only got a handful less sacks than Jason Pierre-Paul. So, and, we look at Jason Pierre-Paul, I feel like in a totally different light than we look at Robert Quinn in.
Well,
he's played 1 year,
Quinn
1 year
tends
less.
to disappear every other year, like you said. It's when he has a contract year, he tends to show up a little more.
Yeah, well, he got paid. He definitely got paid last year.
Yeah.
Bears fans, they gotta be big mad.
But I think he could get back to the 6 sacks, right? Like you think 6 to 8? Because I'm a Cowboy fan, so I got to watch him play. So he played pretty well when he needed that contract. But I think 6 to 8 sacks is pretty realistic.
Yeah.
Yeah. Definitely. I mean, I think he could get there. Like I said, there's a little worry with his tackle floor. I mean, his highest tackle season was his only all-pro season. That was 57. He's never even broke 50 since then. So you are getting a boom-bust player, but like we said, disruptive player, 28 career forced fumbles, which is, that's buckets. So he's a guy that you could, like I said, he could win you your league as the last pick of the draft, potentially. Or you can drop him 3 weeks in because he's garbage.
Yeah, like just everyone we're talking about really is just these are guys that you can get for peanuts that, you take a chance on, and they can make that huge difference come playoff time or when you actually need a win. That's what's beautiful about the defensive line position. There are a lot of these older guys that people just don't think are good anymore, but at the end of the year, their numbers are always there. A lot of them, like JPP, are there at the top of the list. And then the next year, people do the same thing. They want to trade them. They want to, they want to move them. And it's like, I don't know why people do that. I guess they get bored with the same player every year. But
it's like why LeBron's not the MVP every year. It's just because that would just
they're bored with it. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's really that
would just be too easy.
Yeah. All right. Well, the next guy I'm going to talk about is Romeo Akwara. Is that how you say that? Akwara?
Yes, sir.
All right. Yeah. Akwara. So this guy, this is one of those guys that is just fun to watch. He doesn't drop back in coverage very often, so he's 100% about the pass rush. One thing that he does that's very interesting to me is he lines up on both sides of the line, and he produced 10 sacks this year, and he actually had 5 from the right, 5 from the left. So I thought that's a pretty cool stat that you don't really see from pass rushers. You might see Khalil Mack, roll around to the other side, but he never really gets home over there. He's almost always, his success comes from the left side. So I thought that was cool whenever I looked into his videos. He was on the field for 67% of their snaps, and if you utilize the IDP 1-2-3 scoring, he put up 200 points. He did have 27 impact plays in 2020, which, if you were to reference that's more than Aaron Donald, who had 20, more than Chase Young, who had 22, and more than Khalil Mack, that had 21. But everybody knows those names. Akwara is definitely rostered in every league, but he's not considered a top defensive lineman anywhere, really, that I've reached out to and saw. They're always wanting to move him too. In most leagues, he's on the trade block, or could be used as a trade asset if someone just to throw in on top of a trade. But again, he finished 14 overall as a defensive lineman, and again, for reference, he smashed in between Khalil Mack and Chase Young, who are again considered elite. So with him, I would just put out a feeler in your league, try to get him. I would value him as a 3rd round pick. And I know that's probably a little high to a lot of people, but a 3rd round rookie pick, I think he's well worth that. What are your thoughts on that?
A little ballsy. I'm not a huge Romeo Akwara guy. I know a lot of people are, though. And I mean, the numbers this year were definitely, standout numbers for him. I mean, 3 forced fumbles, that more than doubles his career total. 10 sacks, I mean, that doubles his career total. So I wonder why it took so long for him to get the start. But then I also realized that old pencil ear, old rocket scientist man was there, fucking everything up. So
you say that, but he's who brought in Akwara. He was cut by the Giants. The Giants weren't utilizing him. And what's his name?
Just let me talk my shit.
Patricia.
I can't even think of the guy's name. He only started 9 games too. That's actually really impressive. So, I mean,
the Giants cut him last year,
and he had a safety.
Lions brought him in on a 1-year deal, and it was impressive. And they did sign him to a 2-year, pretty healthy sized deal. So they're committed to him. It looks to me. And with those numbers, there's absolutely no reason not to trust him. And I'm excited for him. He's a guy that I'm definitely trying to get to, just bolster, my defensive line. And he's considered pretty cheap out there from what I've been looking at.
Yeah, looks like he signed a 3-year contract with them.
3-year, okay.
Yeah, so he's going to be there at least until 2023. Yeah, apparently he just signed this contract.
Yeah.
Nice. 3-year, $37 million. That ain't bad. $14 million signing bonus.
I think his brother's on that team as well.
So they drafted him. Cool. Yeah, that's interesting. Any thoughts on Akwara?
Yeah, I mean, you're going a little bit out of my realm, but I would say I think he's a great player just from what I've seen. And if you can get him, like he said, I think all things that I look at, even with offensive players, is that contract. And if you know that they have that contract for 2 years, I'll buy all day. And then if you expect that production, that's the way I would go.
Yeah, agreed. When they get paid, you can at least count on them to be on the field. That's where we score our fantasy points. I do like, he does the numbers all check out. I mean, 44 combined tackles, 10 sacks, 18 quarterback hits. I mean, he's got 16 impact plays. That's really good for a defensive lineman. Even better when you consider he only started 9 games. And you brought up an excellent point. I mean, he played off both sides. So yeah, I love that. I'm more sold now than I was before this show. So
yeah, and with someone like that, you go into a game and they can target the weakest part of the O-line on the team with him, and that's something that can fluff his numbers up. He won't necessarily be having to go against a stud left tackle, every down for that game. Whenever that's not working, they shift him over to the other side and see what he can do over there. So that's something that I think that he can help keep his numbers, trending up, is if they utilize them that way. They did last year, so hopefully that doesn't change. It's the Detroit Lions, so they don't always do the right thing.
Yeah, no shit. I love that pick. Romeo Akwara.
They did put money into him, and they're at a point in their franchise where they're dumping most of their salary. So I think that they're definitely planting their flag.
Yeah, they're planning. Yeah, he's their pass rusher for now, for sure. Yeah, I like that pick a lot. Like I said, you definitely made me more of a believer. I'm going to have to move him up my rankings a little bit, I think. My last guy, somebody I never thought I would say anything positive about. And that's not to say that I'm a negative person. I just speak what I believe is the truth. And the truth that I've always believed is that Jadeveon Clowney is the most overrated defensive player in the NFL.
You're not wrong.
Still kind of believe that. But as I've been doing more research into Clowney, I've really been, impressed. I'm somebody who preaches a lot about impact plays. I'm always like, you can be a top defensive line player without getting double-digit sacks. And then the big knock on Clowney is he can't get double-digit sacks. But it's like, think about what a player can't do. Think about what a player can do. So, like, just this last year, he only started 8 games. He had 9 impact plays. That means he was averaging an impact play a game. And just so you guys know, I mean, that puts you on like a 17 or 16 impact play pace. That's good. Like in IDP, if you're putting up 1 over 1, that's good. 0.75 a game, that's pretty good. Because those are plays that are meaningful plays. They aren't just accumulated by volume. They have some level of skill behind them. So if you could put up a higher rate of those per game, that's good. Then you look back at his career and just, again, bear in mind impact plays the way I talk about them through defensive line players. I don't include the sacks. So Clowney is getting up there in 2019, for instance, a year where I really looked at it as a bad year for him for Seattle because he only had 3 sacks. He still put up impact play wise 19 impact plays. And I kind of dropped my jaw when I realized that. I mean, he had 2 touchdowns. Okay. He had an interception, 4 forced fumbles, 3 pass deflections. Okay. And I'm over here like, he had 3 sacks. He sucks. But I'm just like starting to realize, like, dude, like, you're always preaching look deeper, look more into him. I mean, he's got the skill set to get you the points without getting you the traditional kind of points. And then you look at that, he's gotten close to 10 sacks. He's got 9 the year before that, 9 the year before that. He's pushed up past 20 quarterback hits multiple times. He's pushed up past 15 tackles for loss 3 times. These are all premium points in IDP without getting the sacks. So now you put him, hopefully healthy, at a point in his career where he supposedly wants to put in the work. He's playing across from Myles Garrett. There's going to be a level of accountability there because he's not the top dog, and this isn't like when he came in the league and played with JJ. I mean, Myles Garrett runs the show in Cleveland, and if you don't know what that means, Google it, okay, because he does. So it would not shock me if Clowney has his best season of his career this year. And as somebody who has suffered the fatigue of him, the sackless fatigue of him, and just the constant kind of injury-ness of him in his whole just like thing, like he's just got a thing. If you know what I'm talking about, okay?
I'm shocked.
Yeah. So it's just like. But again, I have to talk about the numbers. I have to look at the situation as it is, not as it was. And he can do big things. He's only 27 years old, only played 8 games this last year, still plans to put up more than 1 impact play per game. No sacks, not great, but he had 19 total tackles, also not great. But 4 pass deflections, again, what I'm looking for is the auxiliary stats. Is he still making an impact on the field? Yes. So I think he's, like I said, his ceiling this year is his best season of his career. And he's cheap because he's been disappointing for the last 2 seasons.
Yeah. Well, let me tell you why I don't like this guy. If you're watching a game with Jadeveon Clowney in it, he disappears. In that first drive of the game, he may do something awesome. You're like, man, he's about to win me my week. And then you won't see from him again the rest of the game. Or vice versa. You won't hear from him all game. And then the final drive of the 4th quarter, he gets a strip fumble sack, And it's like, he's exhausting. It's exhausting to own or to be a fantasy manager to Jadeveon Clowney. From experience, that's my take on him.
Yeah. He's a great athlete. I think he's only played like 21 games the last 2 seasons or something like that. I did the research the other day on him. But if he can put it together, like Jordan talked about, that dude's a monster. If he can put that together, and that's what you're hoping for, right? That last season, can he do it? Or this last couple seasons, can he put it all together? I love it. I love the defense he's on. I love that system he's in. I think it's going to elevate his strengths. But can he stay healthy? And we don't know, but that's the question mark.
Yeah, and I think the Browns adding him was pretty smart. They didn't have to overpay. I mean, they paid him pretty much what, I think the going rate is for what they're going to get. But what they're doing with their defense there, I think they're kind of a sneaky, shift on what their strategy is as a team. I think they're a sneaky play for a top 5 defense this year.
They paid him 1 year, $8 million. I mean,
yeah, that's not a bad contract. I mean, they're not committed.
That's not bad for mercenary pass rush money.
Yeah,
it's not Robert Quinn money, but he'll get there someday.
Yeah. Well, yeah, he hasn't had that 19.5 sack season either. So doesn't quite have that.
Yeah.
That unicorn season yet.
I think the sack record gets broken this year. I think TJ Watt does it. Y'all done made this man mad.
Yeah. Well, he should, man. He deserved
one extra game. He sat at it. Yeah. He deserves it the last 2 years. People don't even know who Stephon Gilmore is. Who's Stephon Gilmore?
Nobody
Apparently, he won
for,
Defensive Player of the Year in the
purposes.
NFL 2 years ago. Well, yeah, he's not great for IDP either. All right, well, that's all the guys I got. That's all the guys you got. Kev, what do you think? Let's break it down for a minute here before we hand it off to Hammer Nation.
No, I think that, the passion you guys have for it, I'm going to get into a league. I don't know when, probably this year, because you're going to make me. But I think I need to get an IDP and try it because like I was telling Joe, I think it's a lot of effort. I do Devy and Campus to Canton, so that's even more. But I think that knowing the other side of the ball is important because I love defense. I think that if you add that with fantasy, I think it could help. But I think listening to you guys are smart, and you guys kind of know what you're talking about. It seems like you got spreadsheets and shit. So I'm down with that. So I think I'll take a look at it. But I think it's good knowledge that you're dropping here for these guys, especially people that want to play IDP.
Damn straight, IDP is the way.
Yeah, it brings entertainment for a lot of people on both sides of the ball. You could so often I watch a football game before I was playing IDP that I wouldn't have a Jaguar on my team or the Titans whenever they were playing over in London. And I was like, man, I don't even want to watch this game now. But then you throw in IDP, and it's a lot more common that you have some stakes in every game. So it makes you watch both sides of the ball if you really get into it. Yeah. And that's been what sold me on it. I'm hooked. So. Didn't take much for me.
And you learn so much more about the game. You know so much more about the players. You understand just the nuances of that game. It really is like two teams on the field at one time, and if you're only playing offensive fantasy, you're literally playing 4 positions and only 2 of them you're really plugging in more than one player. So you're playing 2 main positions. It's not that big of an ask to just, and it's fun. It's not even an ask. It's like we're literally it's like when you have kids and they just want to eat chicken nuggets all the time. I actually said something like this on Twitter, and you're like, man, trust me, this pork steak is good. Well, I like chicken nuggets. That's great. And I'm glad you like chicken nuggets. And offensive fantasy is wonderful. We all love chicken nuggets. We all love offensive fantasy. Every one of us. Yeah. But we just want to introduce you to, a little Wagyu beef. All right. We just want you to sit down with some chopsticks, kick back, pour a little sake up and live. All right. So that's what IDP
you won't regret it.
It's the best version of fantasy football that exists. Why? Because it's what fantasy football is meant to be. It's the whole game. It's all the players done the right way. You'll never look back. And what I mean by that is I only been in IDP fantasy playing IDP for 2.5 years, 3 years. I haven't joined a single league with only offensive players since I joined my first IDP league because it literally does not get me high anymore. Straight up. So that's fair. And that's what we're all chasing. Don't lie to me if you tell me but you're chasing the high of that first season when you made the playoffs. You're chasing that high of catching that, you're chasing that high. So IDP, trust me, it's like playing fantasy all over again for the first time. So if anybody made it this far to hear this rant and you aren't already playing IDP, wow, good on you for stepping out and giving it a try. But, step back up off of the Hammercast, channel. We're going to be putting more shows over here. Every other week, we're going to be doing Stacking the Box. I will be here as much as I can be. Joe is going to be here pretty much 24/7. You guys already know Kev. We appreciate the opportunity from the IDP Army. That's where, I do most of my stuff. Appreciate the opportunity to be here and for them to let us share IDP with more people and just continue to grow the format and get people, like I said, to that final frontier, the whole game of fantasy football. So from us to you, world, until Stacking the Box episode 3, we are out.
Did you get all that? If not, make sure you head over to hammercast.com, subscribe, and join the Hammer Nation. Until next time, keep grinding.